April 5th, 2020. I'm James Thomas Green, JTG, and I am at Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital in the cardiac ward, I guess you call it, in room 115. And this is the same ward where Dad was when he had his heart surgery back in 2000. So, I've been here for several days. I came in with having chest pains. I had had a test, stress test over last Thursday and Friday, a few days ago. And I got a call from my doctor, said, you need to get to the emergency room right away because you're about to have a heart attack. So I came in after spending a few hours getting things set up for the dogs and cats, the animals. I was afraid that I might be here for days or weeks, or it's even conceivable I was never going to come home again. So I put down about 50 pounds of dog food, about 30 pounds of cat food. Both for the ferals, I set up a watering system for the dogs and the cats. And here I am. I came into the emergency room. I got a call about 4:30 on Friday from the doctor. I had to go out and get a few items so I could set up the house with the dogs and cats because they're going to be alone. And I packed up some bags with some underwear, my computer, this tablet I'm recording this on, and a couple of books. Again, because I thought I might be here for weeks. Dad was here for weeks, months. So I came in, finally got here about 4:30. I took a taxi. I left the car in the front yard because one thing I didn't want to, I knew that they wouldn't let me drive my car home if I was discharged from here. If I was going to be here for several weeks, I didn't want the car to be sitting here for several weeks. I didn't want to have the car missing from the front yard because then somebody might go, maybe he's not home. And who knows, maybe that would still happen, I don't know. So I took a taxi. The first taxi I called, Orange Cab of Salinas, said that they're not running any taxis in Salinas. I imagine that they just lost a lot of drivers because of the COVID-19 scare. I finally got it connected to Salinas, basically just Salinas cab. And I got taken down here. The driver didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak much Spanish because he knew where the hospital was, and I told him where to turn, and it cost me about $15 to get here. And I unloaded the bags, and they took me in a wheelchair up the. First, they were saying they didn't have any idea if I was going to be there, but the real thing is that they had anticipated me a long time before. So, I showed up almost 12 hours after they probably were told I was coming. But still, so I sat in the emergency room for a while, and I think they were basically just checking me out to make sure I didn't have COVID first. The exact sequence is kind of blurry to me right now at this point, because I was still having chest pains. In fact, when I was getting ready for the dogs and the cats, I was having chest pains, and I kept wondering, am I going to have a heart attack now? But I kept thinking I've been having these chest pains for over a year, so it's unlikely that tonight's going to be the night that I'm going to die, even if. So I was taking a risk, but I need to do it because I kept thinking, what if I'm not back for weeks? I don't want the dogs and cats to starve. What if I die and no one comes into the house for a month? So anyway, I got that taken care of. They eventually, after about 4 or 5 hours, I got a room, this one here, room 115 in the cardiac center. And, everything's kind of blurry after that point at this moment, because, part of the problem is I was also getting kind of confused. Like last night, I nearly fell while I was packing several times. And, I also got very confused at a couple of times. There was a couple of times when I was packing up, I'm getting things ready, and I'd stop and think, what am I doing now? What am I doing this for? Oh yeah, I gotta get the dogs ready so I can go to the hospital. So I wasn't thinking straight. I got here and they did an ultrasound, and they discovered that, I have a big block. Well, they knew I had a blockage, but they more precisely narrowed it down, I think. And then that afternoon, or yesterday afternoon, yesterday? Everything's blurring together now. It's my second day, so it was yesterday. They took me in to do the procedure, which is called a cardiac catheterization, or cardiac angioplasty. And this is where they went in. They went through a vein here, put a little fiber optic through here with a stent on it into my heart. And I had one major blockage. It was at a fairly large artery at a bifurcation that they said it was 95%. And if it had blocked all the way, it would have blocked the blood for a large part of my body, and a large part of my heart, and I would have probably had a heart attack and died. So this was very, very serious. Apparently it took almost 2 hours to do the procedure, and I just have occasional vague memories of my wrist being sore and complaining about it to the doctor. It seemed like it was only a couple of minutes, but it was a long time. And they put in the stent and brought me back to the room. I came out of it fairly quickly, I think. Of course, I was drugged, so I don't remember much of that particular time of it. And so I had not eaten anything. Also on Friday after last thing I'd eaten was I had a sandwich right after I had my the stress test. It was also here in the basement in cardiology here of Smith Valley Memorial. They gave me a sandwich after I did this stress test because they said that you need to eat something after you have the stress test. And I got dizzy and I hadn't been doing anything. I hadn't gotten around to eating when I got the call at 4:30, and so I did not eat or drink. I may have drank a little bit of water, but I think I did not eat because I figured that they were going to do something to me. So by the time they got around to doing, it'd been almost 24 hours by the time they finally got around to the procedure. And yeah, it was very close. They told me that, I was told that there's a good chance I might have actually had a heart attack or two. but they said they couldn't detect any permanent damage. And with that blockage open, now that part of the heart's suddenly getting blood again. It's probably to some extent atrophied, but with the blood flowing now, it's going to get stronger. And, I can also do some real cardio working. And, I could change my life again. Now, one thing about having this particular stent is that I'm going to have to take a drug called Effient, E-F-F-I-E-N-T. I'm reading it off the board over there. So, antiplatelet basically thins the blood thinner, so I'm going to be at risk if I fall or have an injury. I'm more likely to bleed to death. But if I don't take this stuff, this stent could block up. This stent will probably have to be replaced in sometime between 10 and 30 years. He also said he saw a number of other minor blockages somewhere in the 25-30% range that they could block up at some time in the future. He also was telling me more about the heart murmur that I've known about since my discharge physical from the Coast Guard, when one of the Navy doctors told me that I had a heart murmur. And I've never been told it was any kind of a problem, but apparently it's now getting to the point where maybe sometime in the next few years I might have to have that valve replaced, because he said it was getting calcified, is the word he gave. It's the aortic valve. And he said it's still working, but probably about 5 years it might have to be replaced, assuming I live that long. I feel a lot better. I had a few pains in my chest after the surgery. Was one time yesterday afternoon when I had a sudden, like the same kind of pain, but it lasted for only a few seconds and went away. This is when I was sitting in this chair. And then there was another pain I had this afternoon, or well, it was this morning. I was laying in bed, and it was right after I was eating breakfast. I was eating lunch, and I felt it. So probably around 11 o'clock when I felt that one. Same kind of pain, a little more intense, but not nearly as bad as the others. And I haven't felt anything since. I've been walking up and down the corridors here of the Cardiac Center. Same kind of thing I used to do with Dad. As I was doing it, I didn't see anybody out walking, just me. I seem to be having a good rapport with most of the nurses. I'm kind of treating them like my students. Being casual and friendly and non-threatening, and so it's been interesting. So I posted on various social media that I was going to be here, and there was big responses. They're very touching. I'm really glad to know about that. And if you're one of those who are watching this, thank you. I remember when I was getting ready to pack up and going, one thing kept going through my mind, and maybe this was part of the reasons I took a little longer to go. I kept thinking this could be the last time I ever see my critters. I kept thinking it could be the last time I ever see them, because I might never come back. Death was actually on my mind. I kept stopping to hug them and kiss them and squeeze them, cuddle them and tell them what good little creatures they were. And I miss them, and I'm going to be so glad when I get back and see their reactions. They don't know what's going on. They just know I'm gone. I was supposed to be leaving today, but I think that a number of things kind of came together. I've been having high blood sugar, but then they haven't been giving me any insulin at all. They say it's their technique that they start low, like giving me like 3 units. And I'm like, give me a break. That's nowhere near my regular dose. So naturally my blood sugar is going to be high, 300 after eating, because, I'm diabetic. And, today they finally raising up enough that I'm actually dropping down. It was 160 a while ago, so I'm going to have to change my diet, change my life. But finding out that I had a 95% blockage, it's probably been like that for a while, building up. And it probably explains a lot of the great fatigue I've had in recent years. It explains a lot. Why, of course it's a hard job, but coming home from work and being so exhausted, I just pass out. Passing out in the car, in the front yard. And there was that time when one of the neighbors came over and knocked on the car window because I'd been laying motionless in the car for several hours, and I think he thought I was dead. So this has a potential to be a real game changer in my life. I mean, I can probably go out and start walking again. Maybe I'll, start losing weight again because, I'll have the energy to actually walk instead of, because, it would have been a feeding round. I have not walked much in the last few months, especially. I have a pedometer on my phone, and there was, a couple of years ago I was walking, when I was subbing, there were many days I'd walk a couple of miles around the class, going back and forth around the school. And now it's rare that I get any time or do more than just walk the classroom and back. I try to avoid as little as possible. That's going to change now. I don't know if you heard that, but they said that the ER is getting somebody with ETA in about 10 minutes. I wonder if they're going to come in here. Probably not. But, my kidneys, they're not good. They're not great. Maybe if I lose 100 pounds, I can get a transplant. I don't know. Maybe the kidneys will be able to take me out. One thing that keeps going through my mind is if this situation had happened, 30, 40, 50 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, the technology they use wouldn't have been available. Going through my wrist. In fact, even the wrist thing is apparently fairly new, and not many surgeons do it. It just happens that there was a doctor here who knows the wrist technique. Mom and Dad both had angioplasty around, well, Mom would have been in the early 90s or late 80s, and then they would go through the groin. And that's apparently very, very painful and has a lot more side effects. And I'd probably be in here for several days, longer, recovering. I probably wouldn't be walking up and down the hallways here if I'd gotten it in the groin. So yeah, so, I'm a child of technology in many ways. I mean, I know it's controversial to say, but Dad was in the Navy in 1945 when they dropped the atom bomb on Japan. Now, I know there's a big debate about whether or not Japan was about to surrender or they would have fought the last man had they not dropped the atom bomb. But it's unlikely I would be here because Dad would have been part of the invasion of Japan, and he might not have survived. So there's that. And then there's Mom. When she was young, as far as, piecing things together, she was apparently went through long periods of starvation when she was a kid. Partially because of poverty and partially because her parents were not very good parents and didn't feed her right. And so she didn't apparently develop her ovaries. Apparently she didn't actually go through puberty and it wasn't until she was like in her 20s and married to Dad, and he had the money, and she got hormone shots that essentially gave her the puberty she needed in her 20s. That's interesting. I never thought of that before. That explains a bit about maybe Mom going through puberty in her 20s, artificially induced. But then I came along. So that's a second piece of technology. The colostomy. I call chemotherapy a kind of colostomy because people with my diagnosis had a 90% chance of being dead a few years before I had my surgery. It just happened that I came along at the sweet spot. There were new technologies available that saved me, whereas people right before had died. Indeed, I thought I was going to die for the next few years until I didn't. And of course, there's what I did with Dad, with trying to keep him alive by making the CD recording of his voice and talking to him and so on. That's the subject for another recording. And now, going through the wrist, essentially taking a condition that would have required open heart surgery, cutting me open just a few years ago, and even then it might not have been successful. And here it is, I'm going home after just 3 days. I'm a child of technology. So I've got a lot to think on. When I get home, life is going to be interesting. What dreams may come. That's all.